Hey everybody, this is Greg Johnson and welcome back to the Building Bridges with Greg Johnson's podcast. We are so excited about the developments of our podcast and our video blogs. We're seeing increasing numbers of viewers and subscribers and sharers, so we just want to thank you. This whole podcast is dedicated to the idea of advancing healthy dialogue between people who hold different opinions. And we're seeing that primarily through the Mormon Evangelical engagement over the last 5 months. This is our 6th podcast. The first Friday in April, we're dropping this podcast. And for the last 6 months, we have been hosting these dialogues, and increasingly, we're getting greater viewership and listenership. And we just want to thank you. You're validating our efforts, and it means a lot to us. We want you to know that if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or YouTube, we really appreciate that. And to the extent that you like what you're listening to, that it's worthwhile, that it's good content, the more you can like it, share it, and subscribe to it, the more you help us. We're excited that we have 160 plus subscribers now to our YouTube channel. And so just again, thank you to our friends and those of you that are listening in. The more you can help us get the word out, the better, because we want this conversation to continue to grow and impact more and more people. The great thing about hosting these things online and leaving them there for people, even if you're getting into the conversation later, you can go back and watch the earlier video blogs and watch the earlier podcast or listen to them. So again, that means so very much to us. I just want to put a commercial out there to all of you as well. If you're enjoying the content, if you're valuing the content, and you want to help support the work of Standing Together to make this podcast and video blogs possible, you can certainly do that online through our website, standingtogether.org, or through the mailing address that's on the screen now. You can just send something there to Standing Together. That helps us put this together and do all the editing and videotaping and all that. So again, just letting you know that's an opportunity that could help us continue to facilitate this conversation. So last thing I want to tell you before we get into today's topic is that to the degree that you're able to, really would value more comments, particularly on, obviously, YouTube, in the comment section. So as you're engaging and listening, be great to hear people talking to each other about the topic of the podcast or the video blog. Really want to encourage you to keep the tone healthy. I will be checking in on all of those responses and making comments on them, interacting with you as well, and I'll respond to your comments or questions. I just want to encourage everybody to know that Building Bridges is all about healthy dialogue, and every person is welcome, but we want to keep it positive and healthy, okay? We're not looking for unhealthy, critical dialogue. We're looking for a positive, healthy conversation. So anyways, looking forward to more and more of you being involved, more and more of you checking it out. So the topic of today is very exciting to me, and I think it's going to be very encouraging to all of us to think through the positive benefits of dialogue. Now, again, I always talk about the relationship between the Latter-day Saints and the evangelicals because that is the conversation that I know the most about. It's the conversation that I've been dedicated to for over 25 years, and we've seen tremendous things take place. So I give a lot of illustrations from that. But I truly believe these principles apply to virtually everyone and anyone outside of those two faith communities to engage in conversations with people of other faiths or no faiths at all, people of different political opinions, different backgrounds, racial, whatever your issues are with other people. Using and employing the principles of building bridges will help those conversations go better. We need to stand together right now more than ever as a community, as a nation, certainly as a country and as a world. There is a pandemic we're facing, and right now we need to be our brother's keeper. We need to love one another. We need to follow that golden rule, or what the Bible calls the golden commandment, to love God and to love others. Those are the two things that Jesus says kind of basically summarizes all the Old Testament law. If you want to know what it means to follow God, you love God and you love one another. And if you do those two things, you're going to keep the law. So that's what I want to encourage us all to do during this time. And I want to look at the positive rewards or effects of being a person committed to the idea that we can have healthy conversations with people who think differently than us. We can bring down the polemic. We can bring down the anger. We can bring down the toxicity. We can bring that down and start having conversations. You know what? None of us are immune from losing our temper. None of us, even those of us who are committed to dialogue, are immune from struggling with a spouse or with children or neighbors or friends or people out on the freeway, wherever we get challenged by the circumstances of life, and particularly under the duress and anxious time that we're in, we might find ourselves struggling with that even more. So whatever you're dealing with, I just want to encourage you that these principles apply, and I think that they will be very encouraging to you. So let me give you a few examples of what I'm talking about. In our society, we need to be people who understand the principle of the golden rule. Do to others as you would have them do to you. The golden commandment, or the commandment of God in Matthew 22, to love God and to love one another. If this is the case, if that is the way in which God would have us want to live our lives, is there something beneficial to that reality? Is there something that will allow us to see the benefits of having that kind of dialogue and conversation approach? I think there is. So, as you know, way back in 2004, when the tension between Latter-day Saints and evangelicals was pretty hot, a group of evangelical leaders decided, in partnership with Stand Together, to go out onto Temple Square on North Temple and to provide something that we've already talked about in previous video blogs, something called Mission Loving Kindness. And there we engaged with Latter-day Saints and just blessed them with words of kindness and prayers of peace for our city so that people could go to their general conference unfettered by people that might be yelling at them on the street corners. So we did that. We did that in April, and we did that in October. As a result of that, during the aftermath of that first Mission Loving Kindness in April of 2004, I had the opportunity to send a letter to President Gordon B. Hinckley of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I shared with him in a letter of condolence after his wife had just passed away. Marjorie Hinckley had passed away. Their marriage, I think, was 60 years long. And I wrote him a letter to say, as an evangelical pastor, I heard that you lost your wife. I know this must be a horrific time for you. I just wanted to send my condolences and let you know I'm praying for you. I wondered, had any evangelical Christian leader ever written a condolence letter to an LDS church president in the aftermath of losing their long-time married spouse? I didn't know, but I thought it would be something nice to do. So I sent this condolence letter, and as a PS, and I can tell you honestly that the effort was not to write the PS, but the PS came as a result of writing the letter. I just said at the very end of the letter, President Hinckley, the evangelical community will have the opportunity of hosting Ravi Zacharias in the fall, and we would love to share him with the LDS community. We don't have a facility large enough to do that. You do with the Tabernacle on Temple Square. If you would be willing to allow us to use that facility, we would love to talk about that, if at all possible. And that was what I said at the bottom of this condolence letter. I sent a letter to the church headquarters, and they responded within 2 weeks, a wonderful letter, a kind letter, from then Secretary to the First Presidency, F. Michael Watson, who said, thank you for the letter, and the tabernacle is yours for the evening that you need it for Ravi Zacharias to speak there. Now, folks, think about that for just 1 second. According to later research that we were given directly by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they did not know of an evangelical service ever held in the Mormon Tabernacle on Temple Square, when it was called the Mormon Tabernacle on Temple Square. Now it's called the Tabernacle on Temple Square. They did not know of a service that evangelicals had in that building since the year 1899, 105 years earlier. D.L. Moody, a very famous Christian pastor and world evangelist, world known at the time, last year of his life was traveling by train from San Francisco, California, back to Chicago, where he lived and had his church and his ministry located. He stopped in Salt Lake City at our train depot in downtown Salt Lake City. The small group of Protestant Christians who knew the name of D.L. Moody greeted him at the train station and begged him to spend the night and speak to them. And Moody was not sure that he wanted to do that because he was tired. He was older at that time, and he decided that he would speak if they could find a place for him to speak, because the Protestant churches of Utah in 1899 did not have any large facilities. They rushed across the street to talk with the then president of the LDS Church and said, D.L. Moody, the famous D.L. Moody, is in town, and we would like him to speak to us, and he is willing to if we can find a facility large enough to host him, and would you let us use the Tabernacle on Temple Square? And the president of the LDS Church said, we would be honored to let Mr. Moody speak in the Tabernacle, and he did, and the local newspapers covered it. The precursor to the Salt Lake Tribune actually did a pencil drawing of a large, rotund figure. D.L. Moody was a big, heavyset guy with a beard, and they showed him in his dramatic preaching style, and it captured the whole essence. They literally had almost a word-for-word recounting of his sermon in the Tabernacle with all the discussion of who was there and who attended and the music that was shared. And the only condition that D.L. Moody used at that time, in 1899, in order to speak there, was that I be able to take a public offering. Well, if you're a Latter-day Saint, you know that there is not public offerings taken. That's almost a tad bit on the inappropriate side. There's a concern that you don't put money in a plate, and that's something that we do as Protestant evangelicals. We have passing of the plate, passing of the offering bag or bucket, and people will put money as a gift to the church, as a gift to the ministry, and those monies are received. Now, just mind you, the LDS Church believes in tithing just as much as the Protestant Evangelical Church does. You give a tithing envelope to your bishop or member of your bishopric, and you just hand it personally to them. So you do it one way, we do it another way. One's not better than the other, but that's the way we do it. And Moody wanted to take this offering not for D.L. Moody, not for his ministry, not for his organization, but for the widows and orphans of the state of Utah. And he said, I will speak free of charge, take an offering, you give the money to the widows and the orphans of Utah, of people that are in the state penitentiary. And that was such a kind gesture that everybody agreed, and it was done. And I don't know how many times a public offering's been taken inside the Tabernacle on Temple Square, but I know for a fact, according to newspaper accounts, that one time it happened. So 105 years later, I write a letter to the current president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Gordon B. Hinckley. I write him a condolence letter on the heels of our Mission Loving Kindness event. And guess what? 2 weeks later, history is made again. And F. Michael Watson writes me a letter to say, yes, we'd be thrilled to let you use our building. By the way, a building that is large in capacity. It was before the renovations. They could seat about 6,000 in the Tabernacle. They even gave us the assembly hall, which could serve about another 1,000 to sit in the overflow room. They gave that to us completely free. Standing Together did not have to pay a dime to use those buildings. That's remarkable. Wherever we would have gone, a hotel, the Salt Palace, wherever we might have gone, to have Ravi Zacharias speak to a large group of the public in 2004, we would have had to pay people for the sound system. We would have had to pay for the facility, for the setup of chairs, and the whole nine yards. It would have cost us a lot of money. But what did the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints do? They said, here, you can have this building free of charge. And Ravi Zacharias spoke there in 2004, November 2004, making history as the second person to preach in the Mormon Tabernacle who was a well-known evangelical since 1899 with D.L. Moody. Now, I just want to point out that, my friends, is one example of a benefit that blessed our city, that blessed our Wasatch Front. It gave evangelicals an opportunity to hear one of their favorite speakers in person in a venue that they would have never imagined sitting in. They were sitting in a Mormon building, the Tabernacle on Temple Square, to hear one of their speakers, Ravi Zacharias, accompanied by Michael Card, one of the great Christian musicians of our time, a great storyteller. And that presentation, that evening, was filled to capacity. 6,000 people in the Tabernacle, about 1,000 in the overflow. That whole presentation, by the way, is on our Standing Together YouTube channel. If you want to go back and watch that evening was historic and amazing. I served as the MC there, and Ravi spoke, and it was an amazing evening. Michael Card's music was amazing. We had LDS people on the platform. We had evangelicals on the platform. And I'm telling you, that is a benefit that still is paying dividends. People still tell me it was amazing that Ravi spoke in the Tabernacle in 2004. I heard that. I watched that on video. I watched that on YouTube. I was there personally. I can't believe the LDS Church did that. You know what? That's goodwill exchanged. That's a dividend. That's a blessing that we could be thankful for, that we could thank them for, that they could be grateful for and appreciative to us for being their friend and helping them out by doing mission loving kindness in April and October. We didn't do it. It was no quid pro quo. We all know what that word means since the impeachment. There was no deal made. If we come out and do this, will you give us the tabernacle for free? None whatsoever. It was just a blessing. It was a dividend. It was a reward of dialogue. And what happened since then? We don't need to go into any detail, but I can share with you that 5 years later, they let us host yet another meeting at the Tabernacle with famed evangelist and inspirational speaker Nick Vujicic. Again, that whole night is on the YouTube channel for Standing Together. Just check it out on YouTube. You can scroll down through the videos and see the night that Nick spoke inside the Mormon Tabernacle in Temple Square in 2009. Remarkable evening. Wonderful blessing. Just incredible. Then 5 years later in 2014, we did it for a third time, and we had Ravi Zacharias come a second time. Again, that's on our YouTube channel. You can check it out at your convenience at any time you want. And that's that first and second appearance of Ravi Zacharias according to YouTube, over 1 million people have watched that or listened to that in various different outlets. So combined, 1 million plus people have watched that since 2004 and 2014. That's incredible. Ravi Zacharias is totally blown away by that and blessed by that. So, guys, isn't that a big benefit of dialogue? Would that have ever happened if the Evangelical Church and the pastors of Utah had not had mission loving kindness, had not begun to change the attitude of their people, had begun to change the attitude of their leadership? Let's not be an enemy to the Mormon community. Let's be a friend of the Mormon community. Would that have not happened if the LDS Church was not open to that friendship gesture, was not willing to reciprocate our effort to build our friendship and change the way of the past? Absolutely not. So if you think it was a cool thing that Ravi spoke there twice, if you think there was a cool thing that Nick spoke there, as I do, you'd have to say that is a blessing of dialogue, and it would have never happened had people not been willing to cross some lines, build some bridges, develop some relationship, engage one another in kind acts and expressions of love and decency and respect. God blessed us big time. So if that's all I could tell you about the blessings and the benefits of dialogue, I think that'd be pretty big evidence, pretty amazing evidence for the blessing. But there's more. There's so much more that has happened over the last 20 to 25 years. Let me just bring up another point. And you guys have heard me talk about this. Our last podcast featured a couple students from Azusa Pacific University. We just had Biola University here. We just had Westmont College here. We just had a Mars Hill College Ministry from Mobile, Alabama here. Many of them attending University of Mobile, which is a Christian college down there. So we had these students come. But this was the 17th year of doing that. And every year when we come, and there's been snags here and there and difficulties and things that we had to work around and adjust to. But overall, this last session of dialogue was probably the best we've done in 17 years. More personal interaction, more places to meet with our LDS friends. 6 different institutes opened their doors to have us come and visit with them. BYU in addition to that, so 7. A BYU professor, another venue, so there's 8. 8 different locations where evangelical college students during the first 2 weeks of March went and engaged with LDS students of their own age range, their own peers, and had theological conversations about the nature of God, about salvation by grace alone, about the Bible versus having additional books of Scripture like the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. Your view of heaven, our view of heaven. Is there a hell? Is there not a hell? Who is Joseph Smith? Was he a prophet? Was he not a prophet? All of these things were discussed hour upon hour upon hour. And you know what? No arguments, no fighting, no closed fist, no contention. It was beautiful. I watched each and every one of those dialogues. I was there. They would engage with each other. They would laugh with one another. Sometimes they would pause at the very end and have a word of prayer together. And I didn't think that that was wrong at all. I thought that is so cool that they're saying, God, help us to be able to have these kind of conversations as we move forward. And I think it was so encouraging to our LDS friends, the faculty at BYU, faculty at the institutes. I know a Mormon bishop sat in on this and said, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, it was remarkable. It was remarkable that we have had that kind of positive interaction. And you know what, friends? Standing together and our relationship with the LDS Church has opened those doors so that we can go to those institute campuses, so that we can visit with the director at the West Jordan Institute, or the Ogden Institute, or the Salt Lake Institute, or the Orem Institute, or down in St. George or Cedar. We can go to all those places. So we have the privilege of going there. Welcome. The doors are open to us. They provide a free lunch. They provide snacks. They provide a group of students that will come and talk with us. Down in Orem, we had an amazing concert shared with us after we did our dialogue. The very last thing that Mike Harris said, hey, could we just bring our choir in and sing you guys a song? We said, sure, that'd be great. They came in, 100-voice choir, surrounded about 11 of us that were there from Azusa Pacific University, and they sang 2 beautiful songs. One was out of Revelation chapter 5, the whole theme of worshiping the one and only who is worthy to break the seal and to become the lion who becomes the lamb, to sit on the throne and to open the scrolls and to bring about salvation. That's all recorded in Revelation chapter 5. Beautiful music. We shared, we listened to it, we were totally touched by it. We had a blessing to offer them multiple times. Some of our groups are very musical, and we had several times where our students stood in front of their students in their institute buildings and sang the famous Christian chorus, or the well-known Christian chorus, Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. They would play the piano, they would sing it. It was a blessing. There were several times that I got a little moist in the eyes. I was a little tearful because I thought, I cannot believe we have evangelical college students singing, Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. LDS students are picking it up on their smartphones and reading the lyrics to the song and singing along with those that are singing up front. Hey, that's a benefit of dialogue. Do you think that would be happening if we employed the old-fashioned ways of, fighting each other, hand-to-hand combat? Is that a better, more effective way to build an audience, to build a conversation? Did we make a lot of progress in talking about doctrinal differences and sharing our faith with one another? Did we do that when we suspected the worst of each other, or only thought that the worst was coming our way? If a Mormon missionary came and knocked on our door, we were prepared to get them before they got us. Or if you saw an evangelical person passing out something at Temple Square outside on the sidewalk, or you saw a sign that denounced your church and you were offended by that, did that help us feel better about each other? Did that help us to be open to having a conversation with one another? Friends, I'm here to tell you, I don't think it did. Many of you know my own story. I was raised in the Mormon church. My mom converted to the Mormon faith when I was 4 years old in Southern California. When I was 14 and a half, I left the LDS church to become an evangelical Christian after attending a Bible camp in Colorado Springs. But before that happened, I, with my youth group, came over from Colorado to Salt Lake City to attend General Conference when then president of the Mormon Church, Spencer W. Kimball, was the president and prophet of the Mormon Church. I sat in the balcony. I attended a session of General Conference. I was mesmerized by looking down upon the platform and seeing our apostles and our prophet, and I was totally taken by that and blown away by that. That was my experience. But before I went in, there were these people holding out tracts and trying to put them in our hands, and our adult leaders asked us to not take them and just go inside. All I knew was those were bad people, and they were enemies of my church, and they were trying to pass out stuff that attacked my church, and I was told that should prove to me that my church was the only true church upon the face of the earth, because people were trying to run it down. People were attacking me. That's what I thought about. And today, are you kidding me? We're invited to the Institutes of Religion. Are you kidding me? We can have services inside the tabernacle with great evangelical speakers and leaders and musicians like Fernando Ortega. Are you kidding me that those can be on YouTube to be watched year after year, month after month, whatever, for forever, where people can see that and be blessed by it and be encouraged by it and realize, wow, when did this new detente of feelings begin to emerge? Well, in the early 2000s. it was really a cool time. And we've seen it happen now for almost 20 years, 25 years, whatever. So I just want to wrap up our podcast with a few more examples because I want to encourage you, and then I want to apply this and beseech you or encourage you or motivate you to try to think of ways that you can do some of these kinds of things right in your own life with family members, with neighbors, with coworkers. We are kind of disconnected right now, mostly connected through podcasts and social media and platforms like that. But we still can talk to one another. We can still text one another. We can still engage one another that way. And I want to encourage you to ask yourself, how can I change my conversations with some people that perhaps in the past I haven't been too friendly with because we've disagreed so much? They hate Donald Trump. They love Donald Trump. And I hate Donald Trump or I love Donald Trump. How can those kinds of people step into the circle and start engaging each other in a more healthy way? How can those? It can happen, folks. It can happen because you know why? Because I have seen it happen. The Mormon community and the evangelical community have been hostile to each other for a number of decades, particularly in the 80s and the 90s. But in the 2000s, we have seen this new thing happen, and it's been very positive, and it's been very much appreciated. I will say, for example, that as recently, and I don't mind naming him because he was a very kind man to meet with us, but Elder Paul Johnson, Commissioner of Education, met with two of our student groups, couldn't meet with us the second week to meet with the other two because the LDS Church was in serious conversations about how they were going to handle General Conference and issues at BYU and across the board. So he had to bow out of that second meeting. We were very sad about that. But Elder Paul Johnson and I have known each other for a number of years. And he blew me out of the water when he came into that room as a general authority of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he complimented me in front of those Azusa Pacific University and Biola University students and said, before I even say a word, I want you all to know that Greg Johnson is a friend of mine, that Pastor Greg Johnson, did something remarkable that I will never forget. He brought together evangelical churches back in 2004 at our general conference. I mean, did I know that he knew that? Maybe. I don't know specifically that I knew that. I certainly didn't know that he was going to talk about it or that he was going to remember it so fondly. And he spoke to those students and he said, we have found a friend in Pastor Greg. And he just encouraged those students and he thanked them for their same spirit. And I'm thinking, again, we have a leader in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints speaking about an evangelical leader, not as an enemy, not as a critic, not as a foe, but as a friend. And I'm okay with that. I'm good with that. I'm very happy and honored by that. Why? Because Jesus said, love your enemy and love your neighbor. Friend, listen to me right now. I don't care who you think is your enemy and who is your neighbor. Maybe your neighbor is your worst enemy because they chopped down your favorite tree. Maybe your neighbor is the most difficult neighbor in the world because they play loud music and they are so disrespectful and they cuss all the time. I don't know. But you have been told by Jesus in the Bible to love neighbor and enemy. And the way we demonstrate that backs up our words. So we can say we love one another, but if we don't demonstrate it, people don't believe it. I know this happens in personal relationships. I'm aware of that. Again, nobody's perfect in this area. You can't be because your personal issues are your personal issues. But I will say that having a general authority of the LDS Church speak positively about their friendship to me or to the organization that I provide leadership to stand together and open their doors to engage. I will say this in a funny way, and I know this professor will know I'm talking about him, but we have an institute professor who said recently to me, hey, how come your students get to meet with our general authorities, and how come we don't get to meet with our own general authorities? Can we come to those meetings too? And so I said, well, I'll ask the general authority. And guess what? I asked the general authority, and tongue-in-cheek, he said, well, the next time some institute professor asks you about that, just look right at him and tell him, no, you can't come because we like the evangelical students better than your students. And of course, he was just being humorous and funny. I told this to the faculty, institute faculty member, and he said, yep, the word has been spoken. I get it. You guys are the favorites. And so, we're just bantering and having goodwill. So a few quick final comments. I have even had the privilege of using my friendship, my relationships with the LDS Church to help a Christian brother here in town that bought a piece of real estate, a home, that belonged previously to the LDS Church, and there was some problems with that property. And when no answers could be gotten, no restitution could be found, when no solution could be mounted, I went on behalf of this Christian friend to a senior member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, presented the issue, and you know what? They resolved it almost overnight. They paid this Christian friend of mine, this brother of mine in the Lord, they paid him for the exact amount of money that they needed to reconcile the problem, and that was amazing. You know what? Again, a benefit of dialogue. When you know somebody, they're more willing to listen to you. When you're friendly to somebody, they're more willing to help you out. If you're an enemy to somebody, they're going to be less willing to help you out. They're going to be less willing to be friendly to you. Doesn't that just make sense? Doesn't that just make sense? We saw an amazing partnership back in 2008 when California was trying to defend the sanctity of human marriage. One man, one woman marriage, biblical marriage we call it, natural marriage we call it. And the LDS community, the conservative Catholic community, the evangelical Protestant community all work together hand in hand to defend that view of marriage. And we were victorious because of that partnership. You know what? Again, you may be a supporter of gay marriage, or you may not be a supporter of gay marriage. I'm telling you that the partnership, but the unlikely partnership between Latter-day Saints, conservative Catholics, and evangelicals was something that nobody saw coming and was blown away by. And lastly, just kind of the whole fact that we have seen these open door invitations. I have had the privilege of bringing some of America's finest evangelical leaders. Dr. George Wood, former superintendent of the Assemblies of God Church, has come and met with Mormon apostles in their offices and hosted them at their headquarters in Springfield, Missouri. The head of the Foursquare denomination, a large Pentecostal denomination out of Southern California, has come and met with a Mormon apostle. I have traveled with Mormon apostles to the offices of Ravi Zacharias on two different occasions where they had extended conversation and mealtime discussions. I have seen them host scholars who have come in from out of the state to visit with them in personal conversation. And of course, I've had the privilege of meeting with and knowing a vast majority of the senior leadership of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for the better part of the last 10 to 15 years. Those open doors are amazing. It resulted, for example, in a few years ago, when L. Tom Perry was still living, that Elder Todd Christofferson, two apostles, and Whitney Clayton, a member of the 70, one of the presidents of the 70, asked if they could get together with evangelical pastors in Utah. I said, sure, I'd be happy to arrange it. So we got together Pastor Bill Young of the Rock Church, Pastor Mark Gomez of Wasatch Calvary Chapel, and myself for one luncheon, and then Jim Ayers from Life Church, Ray Smith from Salt Lake Christian Center, and Alex Acero from Abundant Life Christian Fellowship up in North Salt Lake. And they had two different lunches, one for our group, one for their group, and they sat down and hosted a meal at the Lion House and said, hey, we're struggling. This is just maybe 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, whatever. We're struggling with our youth, maintaining their faith, staying committed to their faith. How are you handling your high school, your early college age students? What are you doing? What are you seeing? We sat together. We had a marvelous conversation. We had a marvelous lunch. You know, as we walked out of there, one of the things we both all said to each other, all the pastors, and if you're an evangelical in Utah, you know those names. Bill Young, Mark Gomez, you know Jim Ayers, who's retired and no longer at Life Church, but you know these names. You know Ray Smith. You know Alex Acero. These are highly respected local pastors of Utah. They walked out of there. We walked out of there, and we said, who do they think we are? We're not world experts on youth ministry. We're not national experts on how to maintain faith in the life of high school and college students, but they regard us as friends. And were they seeking out insight and wisdom to maintain their youth? Yeah, that's true. Are we wanting to help the Latter-day Saint Church keep their youth in the LDS faith? That's not primarily our motivation, but we understand that concern. We have it ourselves. We are losing our own young people, and increasingly so. So why doesn't two groups of people who believe in affirming faith and wanting their young people to stay committed, learn from one another, try to engage one another, have a conversation about that? We didn't find that to be problematic, and we felt it was a wonderful compliment to us that they would even ask our opinion. So Friends, I don't know if you're hearing me loud and clear, but I think you are. I think you're hearing that I am talking about the benefits of being a person of dialogue and conversation. I'm telling you, whether you're a college student, a high school student, a young adult, a young married couple, older, midlife or older, that these principles can work for you. You may have conflicted family relations. Maybe you have a member of your LDS family that has left the LDS church and is now attending a Catholic church, an evangelical church, or a Muslim church, or a Buddhist church, or a Jewish church. It happens. I met a recent convert to the Jewish faith out of the Mormon faith. I was blown away by that, but it was an interesting conversation. It happens. And that can tear the fabric of family apart. That can tear the fabric of relationships apart. That can hurt and injure people. Senior members, of the family, moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and great-grandmas and great-grandpas can be so devastated by that. We've heard those stories where they weep for days to think our grandson has left the LDS church, our granddaughter has left the LDS church, and they feel that is detrimental to the eternal nature of their family. So they're devastated by that, wounded deeply. You know what? If you are a person of conversation and dialogue, yes, that might hurt your heart, but you can go to that person, have a conversation. Don't get angry. Don't yell. Don't scream. Don't shame. Don't tell them what they have to do, but be dedicated to a healthy conversation between them and yourself. Hey, I heard that you're leaving the LDS faith. I hear that you're leaving the evangelical church. I hear you've become a Latter-day Saint. I hear you're leaving to become nothing. I hear you've embraced atheism. I'd love to talk with you. I want to understand what you're going through. I want to understand what has led you to make this decision. I want to learn from that. I want to support you and love you no matter what. Friends, that is the Bible's message to the world. That is Jesus' message to the world. Love one another. I've said it before. I'll say it again. The beloved disciple, the only apostle of Jesus' original 12 disciples that lived and was not killed for their faith, was the beloved disciple John the beloved. And after he was rescued from the island of Patmos, where he had been exiled for years and years and years, but was able to be retrieved and brought back into fellowship with people after his time on isolation was completed, they would bring him before small groups of Christian believers who wanted to meet John the beloved, John the disciple. And he was so elderly, they would bring him out on his mat. And virtually the only thing he could ever share, because of his physical condition being so weak and his voice being so weak, he would just smile at them and say, love one another. I can't prove to you that story's true, but it's certainly consistent with 1 John and everything that he says about loving one another. In times like we're facing right now, we need to be people who hear the words of Jesus and who hear the words of the Bible and say, yeah, that makes pretty good sense. We need to be people that love one another. We need to be people that show love and kindness to one another. The reason that we called that whole outreach loving kindness, mission loving kindness, why? Because there's an Old Testament word that is virtually untranslatable in the modern world. We cannot take this particular word and fully explain it with a singular word translation. And the Hebrew word is chesed. Chesed, and we usually translate it whenever you see in the Old Testament the word loving kindness, the loving kindness of God, God's loving kindness. That's the chesed of God. And we said, let's show the chesed of God to our Mormon friends and neighbors as they go to General Conference. Let the love of God come out from us. Let's pray for the peace of our city. Let's greet them and say hello. Let's greet them and say, have a nice day. Let's be something different than what they traditionally hear. And my friends, we have seen now for years and years and years wonderful benefits and blessings of dialogue. I hope you're encouraged, particularly right now with what I've shared today. I hope whether you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or checking this out on YouTube, that you're going to share this message and say, this is encouraging. This is inspiring. We need to get the word out that this kind of thing is happening. We need positive stories. We don't hear a lot of those positive stories. We're hearing more of them right now about how people are serving one another during this crisis time. That's a great thing. That's a great benefit. So again, like, share, subscribe this video podcast. Whether or not you're facing a quarantine or dealing with those struggles, this is still something you can share with other people and interact with them about. So that's a really cool opportunity. And again, if you're at all interested in supporting this podcast or our weekly video blogs, please check out at the bottom of the screen. You can see there it says standtogether.org, or you can send a check to Stand Together at our P.O. Box. That would help us, but we know there's a lot of strain on people financially right now, and it's true for us as well. So we just are going to share that with you and let you decide if you can help us with some of your resources. But if not, that's not important. More important that you are being blessed by this. So, hey, I hope that you have enjoyed our time together. We're looking forward to future podcasts. And remember our weekly video blogs that are happening on YouTube. Check them out, share them, like them, and subscribe. We'll see you next time on Building Bridges with Greg Johnson.